Chris, it makes you mad just watching that clip all over again. Just reminding what you have to deal with. I don't know if you're a pet owner, but I think the issues are larger than just the tax on pet animal products, health care products. This is just emblematic of one of a number of kinds of regulatory interventions, right, that you think Dick completely misses with his big picture view of the sky, although IBM would love the big data cloud view, is that, Jenny, as Chris, you'd say that on the ground it doesn't look that way.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I think so many of these laws and the initiatives are well-intended. I mean, who could sit here in a medical device company where we make cures for prostate cancer and say that we don't want that 30 million uninsured people to have health insurance? That'd be moronic. But the reality is, I think many of these policies were, while on the surface they appear fine, there are unintended consequences that are disproportionate to the small companies that we're trying to support and grow in the United States. And this medical device tax is one of several issues that is just, it's an incredible burden for a small company. This tax is on revenue. It's 2.3% of our revenue. To put that in real terms, yes, it is our R&D budget, as I said on the news. We had a budget of $1 to $1.5 million for innovation. And you might say, hopefully, job creation, but it was half our profits. And the IRS began taking this tax every 2 weeks now at the beginning of 2014, and it's a shame what it's going to force us to do to be able to compete. It has put the small companies at an incredible competitive disadvantage. There are 7,000 companies that make medical devices in the United States. The majority of these are small companies. They're not the J&Js or the Medtronics or the Strykers. Those companies are big global firms. Few realize that the medical device tax applies to U.S. companies and U.S. sales. So what happens if you're a small company and you don't have the resources to export? You don't have the resources to set up your operations in Europe? If you make it in the United States and you sell it in the United States, you've got a double burden. And I do not understand why these consequences have not been contemplated by the policymakers and why one size has to fit all. So I'm an angry white man today, but yeah, it's just a shame because everybody's coined phrase is that they want to create innovation and they want us to create jobs in the United States. But the message is, get out of here.
Well, Dick, any rebuttal to that? Do you think she should take a bigger picture, longer-term view of things, and it's just little potholes here or there? She's whining too much?
No, I agree with her. When the Obamacare bill passed, leader of the House stated, you're going to have to pass it to find out what's in it. Well, they passed it, and you found out what was in it. I think both of the big pieces of legislation that were passed by the Obama administration, both Dodd-Frank and Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, were incredibly complex. Now, I don't know how impressed you are by the intellectual capacity of our congressman, but I'm unconvinced that they had a clear view of what all the consequences would be for the bills that they passed. I think instead, as one of the comments on the TV was, they were desperately looking for dollars to make it all balance out. So I think I would have to grade Congress poorly on the quality, irrespective of what they try to do and the broad scheme of what a particular piece of legislation is. Quality control in the Congress of the United States is a real problem in terms of getting a bill through that has been properly vetted, reviewed, that it actually works the way it is intended to work.
But you don't see that as creating a hindrance to the economic growth model.
Oh, no, I do.
Put it in the aggregate.
I do see it as creating a hindrance. We would grow even faster if we didn't have all of these regulatory drags. In the case of Obamacare, I don't think it changes employment in large companies, but I clearly believe that employment in small and mid-sized companies has been held back by the fear of Obamacare and what it means for their business models.
But your longer-term optimism is that, like making sausage, it's messy, but ultimately the product comes out, and as we figure out how to adapt and revise the legislation, and that Chris just has to have enough resources to be patient.
Yeah, what I was struck by, your first presentation from the CEO, I said to myself, now there's an entrepreneur. You got 4 big accounting firms with a little tendency to maybe get a little lazy. All of a sudden, a competitor comes in, and they have to up their game or they'll keep losing clients.
Right.
So I think that the way I look at it is the government bureaucrats, they'll show up at 10 in the morning, take lunch at 11, get back at 2, take off at 4. The entrepreneur gets up at 5:45 in the morning, watches CNBC for a little bit, and he goes home at 12 at night. Now, who's going to win in this battle? And which one? The one with the energy, the drive, and the willingness to really lean in hard. So therefore, I think the entrepreneurs win in the end. It's just they don't win as easy.
Well, we'll see. Chris will get a chance for you to respond. We pull a few more into the panel because part of your mission was a very initially patriotic one. You were saying, I'm amassing a group of assets that can be made in the U.S. by our specialized labor force with the same degree of accountability we have with our radioactive devices. If you're Medtronic or J&J, you need a component made. I want to be the go-to person in the U.S. with manufacturing capability you can count on. You said, we know where it's made, we know who's doing it, we know how it's taxed. Well, that seems like, as complex as it is for you, it seems like that's easier than some of the things that Jim...
And for education, the elderly, and it's becoming more acceptable. And so maybe there'll be less focus on the income tax and maybe new games, whether it's online lottery games, new delivery methods, maybe Las Vegas type of gaming that'll come along. And there will be new revenue streams to drive the economy in that way. But it is very complex in terms of how to figure out how to split the pie between different states.
So how do you do it?
It's all formula.
It's a formula, but you get yourself caught in jurisdictional battles between states?
You do, except they look at each state, right, for the people in the U.S. that deal with the state area, and they may disagree with your formalistic approach. They may disagree whether you're unitarian, how you've split it up. And so the way that you deal with it is understand your business as best as you can, get the information out of the various systems the best you can and put it together, and hopefully you'll be able to negotiate a reasonable settlement without causing too many difficulties in terms of particular issues. Now, our client base are the states, so we have to be very clean and very careful, and a lot of your U.S. companies that deal with the states don't have the same interplay with the states. But it is a very fluid environment and one that you have to get the right documentation. You spend a lot of effort doing that. And at the end of the day, it comes down to negotiation.
And you have to be cleaner than anybody, even though one of your Rhode Island-based competitors wasn't. We won't name names, but you've managed to, guys, distinguishing yourself by selling on the integrity as a competitive edge. But it's hard when you can make them, you know, as Jamie Dimon was complaining, that in this day and age, a foot fault gets treated as a federal crime.
That is true. We have to be cleaner than clean. The way that we deal with the RFP process and talk to the government officials in the various states, how we can approach them, it's more strict than the rules that the IRS has to deal with the clients. No lunches, no, everything has to be approved. We have the former number 2 at the FBI as our chief compliance officer, not somebody that you want to cross. So it's a fun world.
You don't want to cross that. Well, if that's the complexity across states, and thanks, Jim. Jeff, is that easy just within a state?
And what's your greatest concern about 2013? And thought maybe they would say double-dip recession, consumer confidence, and the like. And the 97%, unprovoked, their number one concern was our federal government. Quite a statement for them to be making. So I'd certainly suggest that for all of us who have the privilege of running and serving an elected office, If we understood taxpayer value as well as private enterprise understood shareholder value, we'd be far better off. That any dollar we seek to extract from the marketplace, we must set objective measures that for that receipt, we will provide you something you could not have gotten anywhere else in the country, but you will now see objective measures that we did right. Learning gains improved. Streets are safer. Transportation more efficient.
Now, yes, is that
Yeah.
because you were benefited from a career in business before a career in public service?
Every dollar you extract from the marketplace is going to be used less efficiently.
Now, you have a colleague, your CEO, who was a business CEO before the governor of your state, and yet you guys don't agree 100%. And he's a business guy before, and he's the governor of the state. You're the CFO, but you cut your same party, but you cut your own trail. And where is there ever any daylight or any issues? I don't want to throw anything out to you.
No problem. What I was promised by participating in the panel that I could get one reload if I came here today.
Yeah, that's it.
So I do want to say where we agree to Chris and to Jim, we have the same common rule. There is no income tax in Florida. There is no personal intangible taxes in Florida. There is no personal capital gains, death tax, interest tax, dividend tax, balanced budget, AAA credit rating, plenty of reserves, less debt. So please come on down. In the next 7 days, Jim, we hope to eliminate the sales tax on manufacturing equipment. So we just simply.
That's pretty. How many people want to relocate to Florida now?
And it never drops below 70 degrees.
Yeah.
So.
Chris, you going to relocate? Yeah.
But where the governor and I agree is that our role is to provide a climate for success, and that we have very few things that we are asked to do by the Constitution. That is also true for the federal government. They seem to have ignored that. But there are very few things we're asked to provide in the Constitution of the people of Florida. They will take care of so much, and if we just leave the money in the marketplace and get off their back and keep the regulations down, they'll do superb. And so our unemployment rate is going great, population on the move, and we couldn't be happier.
Couldn't be happier. Well, you are entitled to reload. I don't know if it's fair to ask you to express the perspective of the administration on this right now, but a lot of people on this panel, in fact, people who've spoken already, thought you're the ideal guy to begin a conversation on a looming issue where Starbucks became symbolic of where the British complained in that situation that it looked like for quite a number of years. They're charging Starbucks was paying virtually nothing in sheltered revenues. An investigation that was first published by Reuters this October, but it really broke into this calendar year, 2013, as a huge growing issue. They said they paid no taxes for 14 of the last 15 years. And the way Reuters said it was done is Starbucks subsidiary in the Netherlands had royalties for the right to the company brand, and they paid a third subsidy in Switzerland for buying coffee. That meant Starbucks as a whole could book its income in the lower tax Dutch and Swiss jurisdictions and show no taxable income in Britain at all. That kind of sounds like Hollywood accounting in some ways. And is that wrong? Is that, or is this really nothing wrong? And in fact, this is just, you talked about revenge of the nerds. This is the Brits that are just angry that we went after them on BP, or angry that we went after them on HSBC and Standard Charter on laundering money, or angry over the revolution, or angry over who knows what. But we're just being made a symbol. Starbucks is an innocent symbol of an acceptable practice, or what do you think is the right answer?
Well, first of all, let me just begin by saying I'm very disappointed not to be able to use my talking points from the Department of Transportation on the high-speed bus. I was fully prepared for that.
You're welcome to it.
Less prepared on Starbucks. Look, Starbucks is a complicated question. I'll just do a few highlights. First, if you dig through the press on Starbucks, the UK Ministry Secretary of Business was quoted at the end of an article saying, once I really dug into the Starbucks matter, I realized they really weren't making a lot of money in the UK as a net profit matter. And of course, that didn't hit the headlines. That hit, the bottom of a story that I happened to see in preparing for an international conference. The second thing about the Starbucks question is this use of the word wrong. And what I said recently in a conference, the Business International Advisory Council that advises the OECD, is governments make a mistake if they set these issues up as moral questions. That that the governments write the rules that people need to follow. We need to write them to promote stability and clarity and over time and create investment environments. But to talk about these things in moral terms is not helpful conceptually, analytically. So we try to move that off the table. Then you get to the tax geeky hard stuff. And I think a good quick way to ask the question about Starbucks is, even if you think there are games in the system and money goes to places where it's not taxed, which we'll talk about at a later panel, the harder question is, where should it be taxed? And why does the UK think it has a claim for a company's income, a company that doesn't earn net income in the UK? And maybe it really belongs back here in the US. So those are just 3 thoughts on Starbucks.
Well, I wonder if anybody else on the panel wants to comment on this issue, because, of course, it's not just Starbucks alone that gets dragged in. Every iconic brand, Amazon is being accused of the exact same practices, the exact same magnitude, where there are people that are tax hounds out there that are arguing that, in fact, properly accounted, the firms are enormously profitable. I don't know, but that's what the charges are. They're saying that Google had $5 billion in sales in the UK last year, but paid $9 million in taxes. And they say Amazon's, as we said, paying nothing. The tax police are spreading out through Europe as we speak. The Milan offices of Facebook have been going through an audit, and Google there as well. In fact, fine model of responsibility, fiscal responsibility in parts of Europe. I guess they figure they can show us how to handle the books better of some of these companies. We see that it's spreading even into the Netherlands and elsewhere. What do the other people in the panel think? Is it unique to Starbucks, and what's the right answer?
Well, I don't think there is a right answer. I totally agree with your comments, Robert, about you've got to take the word fair out of it. If we had a John Lennon moment and imagined that all the tax rates were the same and the tax bases were the same around, let's just take Europe, would that help Barcelona because the food and the weather is better than Luxembourg? Would there be a shift? So then, like the state of Florida, what can we do to attract more business, improve employment, and really help our people get a return on the money on the taxes that they do pay? Let's use incentives of some form or another, whether it's sales tax, property tax. You do have a corporate income tax, by the way. I just signed the check.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, it's mine. It's small. But those are the items that if you get into the word fair, all we want to do as tax professionals, and what my boss and the C-suite want is, you have an expense, Jim. It's a big expense on our P&L. You need to manage it. You don't need to be committing fraud. Aggressive, well, we do everything in business has to be a little bit aggressive because nobody's going to hand you anything. Is that good, bad, or indifferent? I don't know, but it's your job to manage it. But we want to make sure that from a SEC point of view, we're not going to get in trouble. There's all the FIN 48. From a compliance point of view, we're not going to get in trouble. That's good. And now there's another layer that we address with the audit committee and the board as tax professionals, and that is, where's the reputational risk that's going to fall out of all this, even if we follow the rules?
That's the reputation side, and thank you for layering that into the conversation. We figure out perhaps what's just, what's legal, and then another layer entirely is the perceptual labor issues. There's growing backlash, of course, as there are customer boycotts and a number of these iconic brands. We've seen the Prime Minister of the UK, and it's becoming quite a large international political issue. The Prime Minister of the UK and politicians of both parties have been weighing in, and that's just the UK. It's been spreading through Europe. Even Sarah Walker of the English Collective of Prostitutes is out there boycotting, saying that these unfair taxes of these U.S. iconic brands force women into prostitution, handing out banners on that. This is what Reuters is saying. It's kind of getting a little bit crazy out there. So what's the Starbucks reaction? Think we have to control it. Because Starbucks very unfairly got in trouble by a very exploitive, charismatic young Chinese journalist on CCTV. He met the CEO of Starbucks at one of our summits and started to bait him on, why are you in the Forbidden City? And he said, well, we're only in the Forbidden City because China asked us to be. there in the Forbidden City. He said, well, that's sacred. Would you be at the Vatican? Would you be at the Liberty Bell? Would you be at, and by the way, they are at all these locations. And he said, but you shouldn't be in a sacred ground like that. Now, of course, they're right next to a Coke vendor, Chinese tea shops, and there were 7 or 8 layers of the Forbidden City, and this is the most public one. And they were there because their Chinese partners forced them to be there, because the people running that museum, the government running that museum, said, if you're going to invest in us elsewhere, we need the support of this museum. They didn't particularly want to be there. And yet it's become a huge issue, and they wound up having to apologize, to shut down. I mean, sometimes the perceptual levels are, and you're a big target, are really unfair. So what did they do? Does anybody know what Starbucks did? Anybody in the panel know what they did? They decided to pay $16 million more of taxes. Is that the right thing to do? And they said, we don't think we owe them, but we're going to pay it. Was that the right thing to do, Mr. Secretary? Bob?
That was their judgment. I would go back to saying that companies live by the rules we write. And I don't know enough about the Starbucks judgment to make a judgment about it, or specifically what they did. Obviously, when you make payments to governments, you might want to be sure they're creditable back at home. But I think that the onus is on us to write the rules that companies can live by, and then companies apply them, and we take out this kind of, oh, I think I'll make a payment, for PR purposes and things like that. It just
well, that's right, the
muddies
PR,
the
and
water.
that's the way it got read cynically. All over the British press, there are articles like, despite pledging to pay millions of pounds in extra tax in Britain, Starbucks faces a battle to restore its reputation over its fiscal stance, with analysts saying the offer is too little, too late.
Yeah.
So,
if I could add a point, some of this press debate goes to a broader geeky issue, which is about transparency and companies and things like that. And I just want to add that when you take this very difficult, highly technical type of information and put it out in the public, you do get a level of distortion that one could argue doesn't really help policymakers, companies, or anybody in the debate.
before I get big picture perspective, because usually when I start getting on really thin ice, I go to Tony to save me.
Leadership, regulatory, financial services, politics, immigration, e-commerce. What in your area of expertise is conventional wisdom that you know now is incorrect, and that we'll all know in 2023? But that's what we help our clients with, is thinking about what the future is going to be, and where is where is there better truth than the conventional wisdom. So I just put that out there for comment.
That's a good one. Who has the conventional wisdom axiom that is very misleading? You think that it's out there in your domain, you see people repeat it, they put it on little posters up over their lamp and tape it on the wall, but it's really bad guidance? Yeah, Jim?
There are conventional wisdom about tax shelters being bad if the process of determining what the U.S. is going to do with relation to worldwide territorial credits, maybe in 2013 there'll be a backlash by nonprofit organizations and the newspapers that corporations, U.S. multinationals, are not using tax havens, and that's cheating the U.S. government, because after tax credits, if you pay no taxes to a tax haven overseas and you're taxed on your worldwide income, then you're going to pay more to the U.S. Treasury. But if you pay taxes in the UK, which is going down to 20%, or Germany, 30-ish, well, now because you're paying taxes in those countries, you're now cheating the U.S. government on a worldwide tax basis after foreign tax credits. So I hope that some additional education around tax havens, in conjunction with the policy decisions of how the U.S. is going to go forward, and maybe the conventional wisdom is not so much an issue about conventional wisdom, it just ties into the political gridlock that's in Washington, which also covers consumption taxes.
That is such a big one. There are so many other consulting firms, and not to mention CFOs, that could have benefited from what you just said there.